Hello. All right. Today I want to talk about starting over strong after betrayal. And you see the flowers behind me at the time of this video. It is shortly after Mother's Day 2025. And I have the roses that I bought for myself. And then this other bouquet is from speaking at a Mother's Day tea, actually at the church where I was baptized 44 years ago. So it was such a full circle moment. And it got me thinking, as it's been on my heart to revisit this whole next level podcast, next level show. But before I move forward, I feel like it's so important that you understand why this is so important to me. I want to rewind for a minute and just give you a short story that I believe will support you if you're at a point in your life of wanting to start over, or if you're at a point where you're like, you know what, this is not the life I planned. I want you to know that I get it. All right. So, a little bit about me. I am truly a type A, very structured person. My background's chemical engineering. I finished number one in my class. I only say that to share just how much of a nerd that I am. I like to say that I'm a nerd with a great personality. And so, for most of my life, I was just, it was very much about college, graduate school, getting a great job, then climbing that corporate ladder. And then most of my friends were like, Cledra, you need to get a life. I think I had been in my 12th or 13th wedding, and I wasn't, engaged. I wasn't dating anyone seriously. And my closest friends were like, you really need to start thinking about more than just work. And so, my typical type A mindset, I started thinking about getting married. And so, I met someone actually at Gold's Gym in Charlotte, North Carolina. And shortly after, we were married. And what comes after that? Children, right? And so, but then I discovered I had these large fibroid tumors and I had them removed, and I was so excited to start having a family, but there was a lot of difficulty. And so we invested in vitro, and I think at the time that was like $18,000. I still remember being like black and blue. I mean, feeling like a lab rat. So many tests and all of this, but it was worth it to me because I am very close to my mother. She was very close to her mother. She was very close to her mother. If you're keeping track, I have in my lifetime known my great grandmother, maternal great grandmother. And so being a mother was always like one of my most important dreams, because I saw the impact my mom had on me. Now I'm very close to my dad too. But anyway, this story is about moms. And so, the in vitro, I was so excited about that, but then I got the news that it didn't work, right? Um, but they said, you know what, you could try again. And as I was gearing up to try again, they said, Cleature, you can't try again. And I'm like devastated initially. And they say, because you're already pregnant. So I was so excited. I'll never forget screaming in the car. And it was Mother's Day, 2007, that I got my first mother to be card, and I was headed to get my final sonogram the day after Mother's Day, 2007. And so, the day after Mother's Day, 2007, I was in there waiting to hear what had come to call my melody, which is the heartbeat of my baby boy. I found out at that point that we were having a little boy. Um, and I discovered his heart had stopped. And I'll never forget the doctor, I'm waiting to hear the beat, the melody, and it's silent. And she said, Cledra, his heart has stopped. And in that moment, my life and all that I believed, I grew up in a very conservative Christian home with two parents. I'm an only child. We went to church every Sunday, grew up in the South. But in that moment, I was just completely shattered, as you can imagine. And a few months later, my then husband, I call him my husband now, um, confided in me that he was seeing someone else. And so not only was I grieving a baby, I was grieving the loss of a marriage, but more importantly, and I want to get to this, and this story is 17 years old while I'm telling it. So I don't want you to send me like, oh, I'm so sorry. Um, I want to step into what happened next. And What happened next was an incredible dark night and season of the soul for me, but that wasn't the end. What happened is that I decided to rewrite my story. And the company that I was working with at the time, they had brought in a life coach. I didn't even know what life coaching was. And this woman's energy was just like so magnetic. And I hired her. And like I said, that was 17 years ago. And I've had a life coach pretty much every year since, most years since. And so I want to share with you the steps that I went through to rewrite my story and how I started over in a very strong and powerful way to now fast forward, be married to the love of my life, have the career that I love, and the life that I really hadn't imagined was possible for me after I went through all of that. So the first thing is identity. The thing that I had to wrestle with and reconcile at that time is that just because I wasn't a mother, didn't mean that I wasn't worthy of all that I desired in my life. So often I found that we can hold on to the plans we had and the identity of who we thought we should be, that we miss who we're capable of becoming. And so the first thing that I want to say to you is that your identity after betrayal or life not going the way you want it to go doesn't disappear, but it can get buried underneath the pain. And because it may be temporarily buried underneath pain, don't make conclusions when you are hurting. And what I mean by that, at the time, I made conclusions that, oh, I'll never find love again. Oh, I'll always feel like I'm an outsider with women who have children. It's just all of this catastrophic forecasting, is what our brain will do. It's very common to do that. So the first thing is to understand that when you are in a dark place, don't make conclusions. Be more curious than you are conclusive. I'm going to say that again. Be more curious about what's possible than you are about conclusive about what you believe is possible. Because it's when we're in pain, it's almost like having dirty glasses. You just can't see clearly. And so the other thing is introducing the thing that I came up with. I wrote it in my book, Rewrite Your Story. And at the time of this video, it's May, what is it, May 13th, 2025. If you're watching it that week, that book I've made free on Amazon Kindle for you. And I discuss 8 weights to drop to wake up to your best life. And one of the weights, the metaphoric weights, is the weight of a suffocating story. And the reason I call this the weight of a suffocating story is because the way we tell the story about what has happened to us can suffocate us. So initially, I was telling the story of, oh, this woman must be prettier than me, or, I'm not worthy of a committed relationship. All of this nonsense that I had in my head initially, that's an example of a story that is suffocating. And what I want to say to you is that the way we tell the story about what has happened to us is a decision. It is a decision. And so I made a decision to rewrite my story. And I want to invite you to make a decision to rewrite your story and to understand that this isn't the end of your life, it's the end of a chapter. And endings also have beginnings. So, and you don't need permission from the person who hurt you. If you're in a similar situation as me, someone who betrayed you, you only need agreement from you that you are going to draw a line in the sand, that moving forward, you are going to tell your story in a very different way. And so I want to invite you to look at the fact that you're not necessarily starting over, you're starting from now because you have more experience, you have more evidence and examples of what not to do. And so I know I shared all of this in a very, short story, and there's so much to the story. And I'm going to hold up the book. And so all of the details, if you want the details of the story, you can get it again on me, complimentary, if you're watching it the week of May 13th, 2025. It's on Amazon. And this book outlines all of the 8 weights to drop. And only one of the weights are actually physical weight that you can see. Because in this process of rewriting my story, I relocated from Charlotte, North Carolina to Atlanta, and I started over in every category of my life. I had to change churches, I had to change friendships, I had to change my job. I had to change everything. And I also changed physically. I lost all of the pregnancy weight, which at that time was about 70 pounds. I started online dating and I met the love of my life. I left corporate America and changed the entire trajectory of my life because of the decision of how I decided to tell the story about what happened. And you have that as an opportunity and possibility for you as well. It is a decision. And I'll never forget what my life coach told me all those years ago when I shared the story to her and I was telling the story and the details. And up until then, when I would tell women this story, even therapists, they would tear up and they would just look at me with such pitiful eyes, to the point where I really didn't like to tell it because I don't like for people to look at me with those pitiful eyes. You know what I'm talking about. But my coach, she said, you know what, Cledra? That's going to always be a sad story. And now you get to decide what you're going to do with it. And I'm going to say that to you. And please don't consider this to be insensitive. Consider it a way of empowering yourself to say, you know what? That may always be a sad story. And now I get to decide what's next because you do. You do. All right, so that's what I have for you on this episode of the Next Level Show. I'll be sharing more strategies of how you can rewrite your story, how you can reset your body, your bank account, your brain, and your business. Because when one of those rises, they all have an opportunity to rise. So here you're going to learn strategies where you can make the money you deserve and create the life you love. Because your next level is a decision away. All right. I'll see you next time.